Hi, hello, my Flat Earth family. So I am going to just show you some of the paperwork so you are familiar with things that are going on. And you might want to take this and just, stop it and pause it and read it. Because this is what I was charged with in the Pennsylvania Criminal Code. And nothing is mentioned in these papers that were originally drawn up that say anything about the federal First Amendment free speech. But I do have something on the Pennsylvania statute of criminal trespass, which says that this never should have gone on. So I'm going to show you that as well. And this was something I took to the lawyer at the preliminary hearing yesterday. No, today's Tuesday. Yeah, yesterday. So there's the other page. And like I said, you just pause it when you need to and read it. Okay. Now the next one is the affidavit of probable cause from the trooper. But I have this page here that I have a little bit marked. So I'm going to show you this page, which is the same thing. It's just a copy, see? Okay, so the things to notice on here, he started working with the Pennsylvania State Police since 2015. And that was at the current office that he's in now, the current police station that he's in now in Skipback. I'm sorry that I was reading. So here's the something interesting to note. The pastor of the church was hosting an event for church members and their families on private property. So in other words, this pastor put this whole thing together, and this was only for the church members and their families. And yesterday when my attorney said that, this was advertised in social media, and she showed him all the things I had printed out that, oh yes, yeah, I'm sure it was advertised. So he knew it was not a private church member only event. The pastor who related, they wanted the woman to leave the private property, but she failed to do so. So I met with numerous witnesses and the pastor who related that they wanted the woman to leave the property, but she failed to do so. Okay. Then it says that she began yelling she knew her rights. So my yelling came after I was arrested. It was not before. And then he said I refused to put my hands behind my back. And that's when he got me with he charged me with resisting arrest, which yesterday that was thrown out. Look, I seen that look in that man's face that I was not in any way, especially then he said, oh, I'm going to throw you down on the blacktop. Oh, really? I'm not interested in having my face all tore up and my nose broke, so I didn't resist him at all. So there's another page that you can stop and look at and read it. You should be familiar with these things. When you're involved in something that goes on that is shocking to you, that you're not used to being in, you just have to take your time and learn all you can. Don't think about your emotional state at the time. So let me show you what I'm going to show you my affidavit. Now, I wrote this one up like a week after I was arrested because I saw his affidavit and I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I need to write up something too. So since he had my camera in the video, I needed to have some way of remembering everything that went on there. And so I thought it would be good if, while things were still fresh in my memory, that I write this down. So I did, it was written for that October court date. I think it was the 10th. I'm not sure exactly, but I think it was. So anyway, before I go to any event, I always make sure I have the public square where free speech is permitted. So I go and I do my research. The rule of thumb is that wherever public is allowed to go freely without charge, and free speech is also allowed to go freely. All public grounds and buildings are allowed free speech. In this case, it was not public ground, but private ground. However, the Supreme Court has already decided in Marsh versus Alabama that private property that has been made open to the public must allow free speech. If a property was owned by the church, who had the farm property donated to them by Ellis Anders and his wife, because they never had kids. And so it was a farm. There was barns there, outbuildings. That's where they built the gymnasium. So it was a farm. And the officer didn't know that there was more than a quarter acre there? Oh, please. So I'm sure he just was totally mistaken and perfect in every other way. So the property was owned by a church who had farm property donated. Oh, okay, I got that. On that day, the property was open to the public, therefore making it a public square. And the public square is an area that the public can freely gather, and free speech cannot be separated from the public. It is also important to note that public does not refer to the economic term public sector. This is something that some people are taught, that maybe even these police officers are said, you're there to protect the public, and are told it's the public sector that they're supposed to protect, because it certainly seems as though they will protect public people in the public sector, which means government employees, school bus drivers, anyone who works for the government seems to get priority treatment. And I have two personal stories about that, where I gained favor because I had a school bus driver's license, and I thought, wow, he let me off. That was interesting. And then my mother, who was involved in an accident where she was almost killed, and the driver of the van who hit her was a postal employee, so they rewrote the accident report to not make it look as though it was the postal worker's fault, which it definitely was. Okay, in fact, the event was a country fair where the people from the community gathered and met. Various discussions were always taking place. All I had to check was if there was a newly imposed entrance fee, which there was not. An entrance fee would have made it a paid event, and then free speech would not be allowed. I also need to add that my free speech was not a protest to anything the church was doing, either at the fair or in their church. In fact, my information supported the Bible, so I am concerned as to why the pastor even objected at all. As a caveat, I recently went to the Ole Fair where they asked for a $5 parking fee, or even one sign says a $5 donation. So that is not an entrance fee, since any person from the public can walk in off the street, and the fee was for parking and not entry. The police did show up at that event, and you can see it on my channel. I have the Ole, O-L-E-Y, fair videos from that. And you can see that I went to the fair office immediately when I got there to tell them what I was going to be doing. The police did show up at the event even after I went to the fair office and explained what I was going to be doing there. They knew the First Amendment rights and only followed me for a short time to make sure I was keeping an orderly crowd. And I was. The one police officer that remained thanked me and shook my hand when I left. The entire exchange did not get recorded that day since, unfortunately, my camera battery died. Okay. I also attended the Cavalry of Souderton car show where when I was showing the evidence of flat earth and answering questions to a large crowd, as can be seen on the published video. Church security showed up and asked me to leave. I explained free speech and told him he had the right to call the police. When one young officer arrived, he was not familiar with free speech, and you all know from looking at that, that would have been Cavalry of Souderton car show. That was the first time I did the trifecta. I did 3 spots in one day. And you ought to watch that video. And then I won't have to read all this. But the thing is, when the supervisor showed up, he asked the correct question. Oh, let me go back and just say that. Show you that. When the supervisor arrived, I said the same things, and he asked the church security if they charged the public to attend the car show, which was the exactly right question to ask. The answer was no. The officer then still wanted me to stand out on the road. And you know what? You know what I figured out was the officers think of themselves as peace officers. So they don't want people to be upset. This is what I'm figuring out. So if somebody's upset, they're going to try and make somebody leave or somebody back off or somebody back down. And since they are the event host, they can't really leave. They can back down though, but it's a lot easier to make somebody leave. So this is what the policemen try to do. They don't stand by the law. They just try to appease people. Instead of educating them and saying, I'm sorry, she has the right to be here and tell people about her issue. And so the people are not being educated. This is what we have to realize. People are not being educated. They are just being appeased. So then people continue to act like spoiled children. And this is what we're having now. We're having just, throw a hissy fit, and anybody who's got a job on, connected with the event, they can just win and push you out because they throw a hissy fit. Well, that's not the law, is it? Where would we be in this country without freedom of speech? We've got to reevaluate this. We've got to rethink this and start educating the people about this. And this is why I'm doing this. So you can see what's going on and you can learn from it. And this is what my whole channel is about. It's about free speech, educating about free speech, and educating about the flat earth. So this is why I'm doing it. So if anybody's watching this that doesn't know me, doesn't know my channel, then you need to know that. This is what I'm about. Okay. So the most unusual thing was that someone broke up the crowd. And that, I heard that because they said, oh, come on now, get along, break it up. And I was talking to the policeman there, or I would have gone over to that man and said, what are you doing? Don't do that. These people have the right to ask me questions. They have the right to be here. You don't treat them like children. Nobody has to go. I was totally in the right. So this is something we have to make a stand on. We have to say, no, we are here because, and this is all right and good to do. So when I was at Schwenkfelder, I already knew the country fair was open to the public, not to mention that a church is sanctuary, yada, yada. I was not more than 10 feet from the community building, which I also applied to manage when it was first built. One of the questions they asked me as the manager's duty was to advertise the building for public use. See, this is what's oh gosh. So anyone who has experience with zoning knows that a property, I'm sorry, I spelled that wrong. I'll have to change that. Am I going to do that right now before I forget it? I am. There we go. Is governed by its use. Okay, properties are governed by their use. You have a private property, but if you use it for a public purpose, then it's no longer, you can't just do what you want there. You can't just say you have to leave. Schwankfelder could not ask me to leave between the hours of 10 and 3 that day. They could not tell me to leave. Please note it is not named the activities building for members and their families only. The community center for Schwankfelder members and their families only. That's so funny. So anyway, all right. The minute I arrived in the center of the driveway outside of the community building, I was greeted by several of my neighbors and friends. I saw several others looking at the banners. Some look out of shock, since we are taught that NASA is our authority. But most want to ask questions. And of course they're going to say, oh, what do you mean NASA's lying to us? What does that mean? And they're going to be like, oh, what? Like, that's the shock of it all, okay? But it's not as though I'm doing something obscene or I'm trying to agitate anyone. No, that's not it at all. It's making a statement so they think. They have to start thinking and looking and questioning. And this is what I do. So most of people just ask questions because they have heard about something about it. Okay. It's all over the news now and everything anyway. So very soon I was approached by Mrs. Elizabeth Hunt, who said, no, you can't be here. You have to go. Like she was shaking her hands at me. And you can see that all in the video that I was taking. And I recorded that day, which was confiscated by Trooper Lynn when we arrived at the Skippack police station. He removed it from my person since I was in handcuffs. Okay, now let me tell you something very interesting about this. When Trooper Lynn first came into my, I will say space or face, or he came very close to me, face to face. And he said to me, they want you to leave. Are you going to leave? And I said, well, no, I'm here under free speech. And he just got more angry and they want you to leave. You have to leave. And I said, I am recording this. And I pointed to my camera. And then he says, I'm recording it too. And he like slapped his chest. But I did not see any camera on him. So I was very like confused as to what he was saying there. And I said, I have the right to see your supervisor. And he ignored me. He said, are you going to leave? I said, I have the right to see your supervisor right now. I have the right to see your supervisor. I don't think I said right now, but I meant right now, like here at this place. So he said, you're going to be arrested. And I was holding on to my banner. And I said, I have the right to see your supervisor. And he grabbed my wrist. The look I saw in that man's eyes was scary. I was not at all going to resist him. And as he pulled my hand behind my back, I turned so he could do so. But then, even though I was not resisting, he says, I'm going to throw you down on the blacktop. And they're, what? Oh my gosh. So it was very crazy. So, soon after Mrs. Hunt was intimidatingly close to me, Her husband arrived and put his hands on my personal property on the banners. Okay, he was going to drag them away. And I said, no, you cannot touch me. He was far more angry and wanted to argue with me, as can be seen on the video. I was patient and firm as depicted by the photograph that somebody sent me. And I did a video on that, so you can see that. You can see I held up my hand. I was telling Mr. Christopher Hunt that he cannot touch me or my things. Mr. Hunt was so irate that the large African-American man seen in the picture came over and tried to calm him down to no avail. I tried not to look into his eyes, and enrage him any further. Okay. The pastor, who was wearing a baseball cap as seen in the picture, and you can go to that video, and identified himself as the pastor, asked me to leave, and I said, no, I'm here under the First Amendment free speech. He called the police, and I did not hear their conversation. The pastor must have told Trooper Lynn that the country fair was a private event for members and their families only, since that was what was on the report that you just saw. When Trooper Lynn arrived, he came over to me already putting on blue latex gloves. This is very interesting, and hopefully it's caught in the video, because I was facing Trooper Lynn as he walked towards me, and to his left, to my left of Trooper Lynn, that would have been Trooper Lynn's right, the EMT woman, I think it was a blonde woman, I looked at her putting on the blue latex gloves and her dark blue uniform. It was not a man, it was a woman, because the build was slight, and I think she had blonde hair. Anyway, why would they be putting on these blue latex gloves if it were not to intimidate me, and he had already decided that he was going to arrest me no matter what? No matter what. So, I think down at the end of this, I'm going to show you the question I'm going to ask Trooper Lynn when we get to the trial is, when you were in the military, did you, when you confronted the enemy, did you stop and ask any questions? Don't you think that's a very interesting question to ask him? Because he was in the military. He told me himself back at the station that he does not believe in God or the Bible. That's what he told me. This Trooper Lynn is a poor soul. You really do need to pray for him. So no other confrontation with any other police in the 2 years I have been doing this ever came at me already putting on blue latex gloves. He was already prepared to arrest me without any conversation. There was also someone to the left putting on the blue latex gloves, I believe was the MT, yada yada. At this point, things escalated very quickly. I said, no, I'm not. I'm here under free speech. I asked for his supervisor. Lynn refused after me repeating it several times. I warned Trooper Lynn and I was recording. See, I did all, even my, I can tell you things that before I even get to this point in writing it, because I remember these things. You don't forget something like this. You don't forget it. It gets seared in your memory because of the emotional content behind it. This is why spanking children is very effective in teaching them a lesson. And I didn't understand it, but they connect the little pain that they feel. It's just more of a shock to their system. So the shock is identified with the lesson, and then children say to themselves, well, I am not going to do that again because I would get a spanking. I remember that. So that's why, people who beat their children is not good, but a little spanking is not hurting anybody. It's just enough so they remember, and that could save their life someday, right? So here we go. Lucas' eyes, ex-husband's eyes were in a violent rage. Yes. So he yelled at me and said I was resisting arrest, and then he was going to throw me down the blacktop. Anyway, even to the point when both of my hands were behind my back. I remember thinking this guy was way too hyped up and out of control. So all the way when I was walking to his car, and I did not have to be pushed, I was speaking to be heard, which is in the law that I'm allowed to be speaking to be heard. This is an illegal arrest. I have the right to First Amendment free speech. That's what I was saying. We got to his car. He strangely shifted me to the front of his car. He said it was to be in view of the dash cam. Then he thought for a second and said, maybe I should go to the ambulance, be checked out. You know what? I'm not sure he said it was to be in view of the dash cam, but that, okay, in front of the car. It was to be in view of the dash cam. I had to figure that out. So I figured out that it was to be in view of the dash cam, and I'm not exactly sure that he said it, but that's what it was. Then he thought for a second and said, and it was a little strange. I'm going to say a little strange what he was doing there. Then he thought for a second and said, maybe I should go to the ambulance, be checked out. So he walked me over to the ambulance. The EMT asked if there was anything I needed to be checked, and I said I might have diarrhea. Now, I have a condition called IBS when under stress, often have bouts of spontaneous, and I'm telling you, it's painful. So, I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. But it's the fight or flight syndrome. So, you will often see animals in flight having a bowel movement. And it's just a natural reaction, okay? She asked if I needed to go to the porta potty, and I tried to evaluate and determine if it wasn't necessary. Okay, she asked if there's anything else, and I thought for a second and said no. So I was taken back to his car, sat in the front seat after he cleared off his papers in the car. He put me in the front seat. I don't know why he did that. Usually people are put in the back seat. Even though he was treating me like I was a murderess, why would he want me in the front seat if I was so violent? I don't know. Why is that? Okay. So the air conditioning was very cold, and I took my foot and turned the vent to direct the air away from me. Then upon seeing Trooper Lynn interviewing Mr. and Mrs. Hunt, I wanted to hear what they were saying, so I took my foot and lowered the automatic window. My skirt has shorts under it, so I was not immodest. Upon finding the window down, Trooper Lynn was angry and put it back up and threatened me again. So at some point he moved the car, and after that, Trooper Brian came over and opened the door and asked if he could loosen the handcuffs and make me more comfortable. I said I should not be here, and what would that do anyway? I could not sit back, and loosening the cuffs would not help. So he shut the door and did nothing. I know his name was Brian since he was having a discussion with me about Marsh versus Alabama at the station. Oh yeah, it was I was there 5.5 hours. 10:20, I was arrested, and I was only at the fair a few minutes. I was parked at the end of the first field of parking that was filled. So I was in the second to last row, but near the end. So I was one of the last ones in the first field of parking. There must have been 10:20, probably 200 cars in that first field. I'm just guessing, but I think that's a good estimate. There may have been 5 rows of 20. That would have been 100. No, 20, 1, 2, 3, between 100 and 200 cars. It's hard to remember that exactly. And there was another field that they had ready that they were filling up. So, 21, 2, 3. Yeah, maybe there was 100 cars in there. But if you have 2 or 3 people, I don't know. I can't say. Anyway, I know this is since Brian and I were having a discussion with me about Marsh versus Alabama when we were at the station. And he said to me, Brian said to me, well, that's a town. I'm there. No, it's not the same thing. See, he didn't know the law. He didn't know that it was a company development that functioned like a town. The streets were not dedicated. It was not a municipality. So, okay. Seemed like a long time was in the car. All can be verified by the video. On the drive back, Trooper Lynn wanted me to agree that he was treating me nicely, and I did not agree. I did not say anything. But I just felt strange about him asking me that. Like, there's some reason why he's asking me that. I never should have been arrested and cuffed in front of my friends and neighbors and embarrassed like that and threatened to be thrown down on the blacktop. This was in his training and in his mind, and his mind was going through the playbook. Had I in reality been resisting arrest, he would not... Oh, a bad spelling there. What happened? There's got to be a typo. Thank you. Resave. He would not have verbalized it. He would have just done it. He would have just thrown me down. If I was really resisting, he would have just thrown me down. He had to justifiably reason for throwing, T-H-R-O-W. Wow, good thing I'm reading this. He had to justifiably Justif. Justifiably reason. No, he had to justify that's what I meant to say. He had to justify a reason for throwing me down, so he could only say it. It was a threat not needing action. See, he had no reason to throw me down, so he could only say it. That's in his mind. This is what he's going through, was his training, and so he didn't have a reason for throwing me down, so he could only speak it. Okay, when we got to the station, the supervisor was standing in front of the building. He looked like he just came out of the door and was not carrying any keys or hat or anything that made him look like he was away from his desk in a car on Route 422, as he said he was. I appeared that procedure was totally ignored and my rights were refused. Okay, the first thing the Supervisor Patrick Ruddy said when we walked up was, "So this is the one who surreptitiously recorded me." And my response was, "I never did anything in secret. I wear my camera right on my chest just like this." And that's what I said to him. Just straight out plain, that's it. We walked in the door and they stopped me and read the sign on the inner door which said that no cameras beyond this point. Okay. Now let me tell you what this is so you don't make the same mistake I did. I have since learned that it was not an imperative that I go beyond that door. I could have sat in the lobby and kept my camera. However, I was not given that choice. Trooper Lynn grabbed my camera holder and attempted to break it by pulling on the string around my neck. I stopped him and told him to grab the corner. He took it out and turned it off. Then we walked in the back room. I was sat on a black slatted metal bench without a backrest. The room was very cold. I was cuffed to the bench with my right arm and my right ankle. They did ask if I was comfortable. What would they have done? Given me a soft chair? No. I was a bit confused as to the meaning of comfortable. When I told them it was a cold, they provided me with a yellow fleeceback plastic tablecloth that I had to put around myself the best I could. The first thing Trooper Lynn did was to figure out something to charge me with. He was mostly talking to Trooper Brian. There was one part they wanted me to read. I told them I did not have my glasses and could not read it without them. I'm also hard of hearing because my father was hard of hearing, and that is why I learned how to speak loud. You all know that when I'm out on the street, I can speak and be heard. So Trooper Brian spoke to me about Marsh versus Alabama, saying Marsh was on a sidewalk, and I said it wasn't a municipality. The roads were not dedicated. It was a company living development that looked like a functioning town. It was privately owned. He said he wanted to see how this case turned out. That's what Brian said. In the Marsh versus Alabama case, all these things were brought up about the town wanted Grace Marsh to leave, and she was arrested for trespassing, and they wanted her to get a permit and all this stuff, and the Supreme Court said no, permits are not necessary, and she had every right to be there. Even though it was private property, you allow the public on it, so you can't just say that that free speech is not allowed when you allow the public. So you can't separate the public from free speech. Just imagine, several ladies in that parking lot right where I was standing, having a conversation, showing a newspaper article, and, having a lively discussion about something going on. You can't shut that down. What was a pastor going to go over there and say, oh, come on, break it up, ladies, you old biddies? I mean, what would he say? Just ridiculous. So, Trooper Lynn was playing with my phone, taking out the battery. I warned him that the video should not be deleted. I also said he could download a copy right now, just as long as he didn't delete it. Trooper Lynn was writing up a document and was asking me how to word the language. And then he wanted me to sign it. And I said, I can't sign it unless someone else reads it. See, he was writing this up, but did not tell me that he wanted me to sign this. I didn't really know what he was doing. I thought maybe he was filling in a report or something. I don't know. But I could not sign it unless I really had somebody read it. A lawyer. They did not allow me to get a lawyer or call a lawyer right then and there. I have a public defender. So why didn't they allow me to talk to a public defender? Doesn't the public defender's office have somebody right there to talk to? Okay. I don't know that. I'm going to have to ask somebody that. I cannot sign it because I didn't know the ramifications. Trooper Lynn was not pleased, and he kind of shook the papers. He was not happy that I was not going to sign it. So I asked him, why do you need my video when you said you were recording the whole time too? I do not believe that Trooper was telling the truth when he said he was recording. No, I don't think he was telling the truth. Then Trooper Lynn told me he was getting my fingerprints taken, that I was getting my fingerprints taken. Trooper Lynn chained my ankles together and I was walked to the small bathroom where I was told to wash my hands. He apologized for the smell of the bathroom. It seems that the men can't hit the toilet, and it did smell. He took my fingerprints on the digital screen. Then he took my mug shot, face forward and face turned to the left. I was curious, but didn't ask why he didn't have me turn to the right. It didn't seem official. Could all that have been done to further intimidate and humiliate me? I don't know. Then the next shift came in, and Trooper Lynn was boasting that he doesn't like arresting people, but he does like fining trucks. He does like trucks. I put the fining in there because that's what he was talking about. Getting all these trucks. A large young trooper came in with dark eyebrows and dark hair, and he was identified to me by Trooper Lynn as the guy who is focused on criminals. Okay, he likes getting criminals. So, conversation was on my phone video, and this trooper said that a verbal okay is good enough. And I said I gave a verbal okay, but nothing was said after that about it. See, I did not give, Trooper Lynn was not happy that I knew he could get a copy of the video and give my phone back. He wanted to keep my phone. He wanted to keep me away from the video. He did not want that out. And I just pray to God that they don't tamper with that video. The next thing that happened was a FaceTime with Judge Paul N. Leo. He answered the phone not wearing his robe and went to put it on. And I can't be certain that he had any shirt on at all. When I first saw this Judge Paul Leo on the cell phone that Trooper Lynn was holding, did he have a muscle undershirt on? The impression I got was that this guy was sitting around watching the ball game in his underwear. That was the impression I got. Now, whether he was doing that or not, I just don't think that you should be answering the phone. If you want to be taken professionally, you shouldn't answer the phone like that on a conference or a Skype call. You should have your robe on, sitting at a table, and being very sober-minded. Why did he do that? And it makes me think, well, what is all this? What is going on here? I just never would do that. I would never show any disrespect to anyone to the point where I would do that. It just seemed disrespectful to me. Okay. I remember thinking that this was a strange way to answer a professional call. Okay. He asked if I wanted him to read the documents, and thinking he would be annoyed. Look, I'm sitting there in this chained like a murderess to this bench, this cold metal bench, and I did not want to annoy anyone. I'm still like reeling from Trooper Lynn having murder in his eyes. That's the way I felt this guy was going to hurt me. So I asked if I wanted him. He asked if I wanted him to read the documents, and thinking he would be annoyed, I said I could read them when I got home. He said I was cited for disorderly conduct, and he said cursing. And I objected to that because I don't curse. And then he agreed it was only for loud noise, loud speaking or something. And then he told me that he was going to issue a warrant for my phone later that night. I assumed that the warrant was not prepared, and that was why he didn't do it right then and there. A few days later, I did call and ask his office about the warrant, and the clerk said that there was no warrant in the file. I was there in the sheriff's office, or the police station, for 5 to 5.5 hours. So why does it take that long to fill out paperwork? And watching Trooper Lynn filling out the paperwork, I think I could have done it several times in the time it took him to do all that. So I don't know what is going on. Was he just trying to kill time? Was he just trying to delay my release? Was he just trying to keep me there for some reason? Someone, other people have told me that, oh no, you just go in, they write you up, and you're gone. I mean, well, what was going on? Why does it take me 5.5 hours? That's a little strange, I think, a little strange. There was a purpose. Someone else agreed that Well, they said it outright. Oh, they just didn't want you going back to that fair. Well, that's what I thought too. Afterwards, I thought that too. So here we go. The shift sergeant and the night troopers met in the same room, and there were two things he said. There were two events going on that they needed to know about. The second was the Creamery Tire Customer Appreciation Day at the 4-H Center. At that, trooper then pointed at me from across the room and said, "Don't you go there." Can you imagine? Can you imagine? In front of all the other officers, he said that to me as though he was my parent. I expected the room to erupt with laughter, but I think they knew he was wrong for saying that. I'm even a customer of Creamery Tire, and if I wanted to go there, I would go there. I mean, my goodness. But I would not have gone there anyway, because unless it was just to go hang out. But I would not have gone there with free speech because it was not a public event. It was a Customer Appreciation Day. Customer Appreciation Day at the 4-H Center, which is not a public park. If there was a Customer Appreciation Day at the public park, not the 4-H Center, but at a public park, I could have gone with my banners. And I could have gone right through the middle of the whole thing, but I don't do that. In fact, I did go to another public park. It was called Church Picnic. They had it at a public park, and I went and took my banners and I set up over near the bathrooms. I did not ever walk through the middle of that church picnic. I set up near the bathrooms just so people, if they were going to the bathroom, they saw my stuff, they could, "Hey, what do you got here?" It was all their decision. I was not in the middle of anything. And that's what you're allowed to do. And the pastor of that, if you watch that video, Church Picnic, the pastor did call the police. And the police did come, and they tried to intimidate me and get me to move, and I just stood my ground. And they even tried to say, "Oh, well, you have your signs attached." And what I did was I had a bungee cord, and it was around this electric transformer that was on the ground, and it was just so the banners wouldn't blow over if wind came along, and I could stay off of the path and just have them flat up against the transformer and not be on an angle. So I thought I was staying out of people's way by staying off of the path and just putting a bungee around the transformer. So they did not tell me to leave. Those policemen did not tell me to leave. They did not cite me with anything. There was no problem there. And I was only there for an hour and a half anyway. I just wanted people to see. And if they were going to come over, then they were going to come over. But, all right, so then I knew this was all just a mockery of justice, and I went silent. Okay, here we go. I would go there to Creamery Tire if I wanted to. Okay, then I knew then that this was all just a mockery of justice, and I went silent. See, it just didn't seem as though they were serious. Trooper Lynn was not serious about this. And Patrick Ruddy, his supervisor, were having a conversation about getting me a ride home. And they said some sort of a code word. It was like they didn't mention anybody's name, but they said, "Oh, we'll do a like 10x40 or something." I'm just making that up, but it was a code word that meant something, and I didn't know what it was. But this will be important for a little bit later. But they agreed, "Oh yeah, we'll do that." And so I was a little surprised. Later, I'll tell you what that was. There was some contact made with the man, Jack Kelly, who towed my car from the fairgrounds upon the supposed request of the church pastor. I was escorted in ankle chains to the front lobby, where I was read the papers and asked to sign them. My release papers, I guess. Which showed, and I've showed you them earlier in this video. To the front lobby where I was read the papers and asked to sign them. I wrote, not read, only received on them and signed the first one. Trooper Lynn was angry and told me I was defacing court documents. So under duress, I signed the other documents. Trooper Lynn then unchained my legs and showed me the door for me to walk home over 2 miles. While walking through Skippack near the center of town, I was approached by a man who called himself a fan of flat earth. He said he had a website where he and a buddy put up information about chemtrails. He said he was meeting his girlfriend. He said he saw me and pulled over to meet me. I wasn't quite sure what was the truth. I told him about my arrest, let him take a picture of the arrest paper, and told him to tell everyone he could. He also took a picture of me. I asked him for a ride to Cedars Country Store, and he obliged. While in his car, I asked him to call the man who towed my car, and he did, but he let me speak. I walked home from Cedars Country Store and drove my car to the impound lot in Fairview Village. Now, I'm going to tell you something about this man who I saw in the middle of Skippack. I think that was the man 10x40 that they were talking about. It's very possible that they had some guy that they knew who does recon work for them. So, I don't know. I did not talk mean about the police or anything. I just said, this is what they did. I'm very matter of fact. This is what they did. I'm not a hysterical woman. And I showed him the papers, and I said, just tell everybody you know. So that's why I said that. Okay. I was charged $225. I think I have to look at the receipt, but I'm sure it was $225. With the last few pennies I dug out of the car tray, he said, oh, you could let the last few cents go. But I wanted the obligation to be paid in full since I don't owe anyone anything. That's how I express my anger, is to make sure everything is perfect. Took a picture of my mother's car in the impound lot, and Jack Kelly nervously said, make sure you got the hours of operation and note that it is not those hours now. I drove my mother's car out and told the man who helped me that I would be back for my car in a little bit. There was a man there working in a shop, and he was helpful to me. So when I got back home, I ordered an Uber ride back to Fairview Village and picked up my car. The following week, I called Judge Leo's office and asked if there was a warrant for my phone, and the girl said there was nothing in the file, which prompted one of the emails to Judge Augustine. I cannot get an answer from anyone about my phone except that I must go back to the police station and ask for my phone. I sent an email to Trooper Lynn, and he refused to give me an answer. He said it was under investigation. That's what he said. So here, I'm going to finish this up now. This is information you may not know. Zoning always goes to the use of the property. Pruneyard Mall created a public square, and so did Central Schwenkfelder Church. Where the shopping mall created that public square during its hours of operation, so did the church have hours of operation where the public was allowed to freely come onto the property. So goes the public, so goes public free speech. I was invited onto that property just as other members of the public were invited onto that property. May I add that the only way to stop free speech is to charge an admission fee for entrance. I suspect that the church will hereafter be initiating that fee. The use of the property that day between the hours of 10 and 3 was public use. It is interesting to note that the most prominent free speech users were pastors. Yep. And politicians. Yep. So my free speech held no protest to anything the church was doing. In fact, I was not protesting at all. I was simply offering information. The only way my free speech could be considered a protest is if the church does not support what the Bible says. Why would the pastor supposedly ban me from the entire church property unless he knew what the scientific evidence was on my banners and did not want the public to see it? I was just showing the results of my research project. I know of no doctrine that I was so-called protesting against. Okay. My research project was, I researched the evidence about flat earth. Okay. I've attended several other events on private property and was even questioned but not arrested. First question was, is there a charge to enter the event? That's the right question to ask. Trooper Lynn did not ask that question. This is the correct question to ask. Trooper Lynn did not ask what. In the 4 years he has worked in our community, he should have known the answer. Not resisting arrest, but protecting my personal property. That's why I was holding my right hand on the banner. The resisting arrest charge was thrown out at the preliminary hearing on 2nd of December, yesterday. Posting advertisements? No. I carried them on my baby carriage, wheelchair, or outdoor market shopping cart. The lawyer at the preliminary hearing gave the example of carrying her pocketbook onto the property. That's something, the law reads that it must be attached or posted, that you walk away from it and it stays there. So that is something you cannot do on private property without permission. I did not attach anything. Okay. And that was something at the church picnic video. Those police officers asked me that question. They asked me if I was attaching. No, I did not attach it to anything. I had that bungee cord around the transformer, but that's not attaching. That's a temporary thing. So, and I took it with me when I left. Did not leave anything there. This arrest is nothing less than censorship. The pastor of that church abused police power to censor information. There is definitely a reason why the church pastor would not want the flat earth to be accepted by the church members. So that's a definite reason. There is that. You can't ignore that. At the preliminary hearing, Trooper Lynn said out of nowhere at minute 21:17, the information Marilyn, was conveying was not the issue. Now, I want you to go to that, and here's the link. Go to that and go to 21:17 and listen. Go to 21 minutes and then just listen for a half a minute and see if you can detect any reason why that. It just seemed as though his remark about that, and tell me if you wondered why he said that. I said, where did that come from? When I first heard him say that, I'm there. Where did that come from? There was no prompting in his saying that. Didn't that comment seemed out of place to me? So why did he say that? Since my lawyer said nothing about the information being the reason for the arrest, then what prompted him to say that? Why did he seek to defend himself and disclaim that? I want the opportunity to ask Trooper Lynn, when you were in the military confronting the enemy, did you stop to ask questions first? Now, why would I ask Trooper Lynn that? Because he was in the military. A lot of these military people are coming out and getting jobs as police officers. And there's a whole different training to doing that. Totally different training. When you have military people acting as police officers, we are the enemy combatant. They do not ask questions. They go to the enemy, they subdue them, they don't even talk to them. You are the enemy. I'm lucky I wasn't shot. So, I also know that he will be viewing this video and wish him no ill. He is in service to the public or the corporation of America, which I hope you all know that by now. And going through trials, even public ones, is how we decipher the law. So there we have it. I hope I didn't bore you too much on this, but this might be helpful information for you. I wanted you to just, you know, think about these things so you're prepared. And you need to educate people. In the description of all of my videos, I have that permanently in there now, is the Supreme Court cases that that defend your First Amendment right, that, you know, support it. So what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. I could have had a amplification device for voice amplification, and I don't use that. But that would have been a lot louder than me. That would have really been loud, but I would have been allowed to have it. But I didn't. So, okay, guys, thank you so much, and love you all, and have a good night.